I don't suppose he meant to say greasy fingers through my greasy hair the second time around. It might have been intentional, but I don't think so. However, I'm going to have to re-record that because it's too loud. I don't know what's the matter with this machine. Even when I put the dial back as far as 2, it still seems to... the needle is dancing right over into the red, which in fact is what it's doing now, although not too much. But that record of Bim Bam Baby is worse than I remember it being. He shouts. What do they say? Less is more is less. I think that's an example where more is less. He tries much too hard. Sinatra can swing a little bit sometimes. On his record of The Soy with the Fringe on Top, from one of his broadcasts back in 1943, he manages to hit quite a nice groove, not relying so much on the accompanying orchestra to provide the beat. But most of the time he doesn't swing, he doesn't even try. He just sings legato. Oh-de-doo, oh-de-doo. Incidentally, yes, up to now, or up to that record, it was the 15th of November. It's now the 16th. 24 hours later, more or less, and I'm back on this Corny rhythm tape. Saturday evening. I should probably go down to see a picture later. Something on called Sleepless in Seattle. But because it's on at 9 o'clock, maybe the others will not want to see it. They might have different ideas, in which case I'll come back up here. I don't think I'm going to like it anyway. It's supposed to be a sequel to a film called can't remember now, something with Billy Crystal in it, which was a big hit a few years ago, and I didn't like it, which is not unusual. I hardly like any films these days, but every so often I see something I like. Do Corny rhythm. I had several things lined up for this tape, but not physically lined up, just lined up in my mind. And it's a question of getting them, finding them, locating them. But one of the ones that I saw a couple of days ago, and I ought to be able to find it. Now where are we? You played it Hayfoot Strawfoot for me on your tape, and I've got the 78 here, Hayfoot Strawfoot. The other side called Sherman Shuffle, which I think is one of the lesser known of the Ellington classics from that period. I think it's rather good. Another intro is now come on, where is that record? I had it in my hand just a couple of days ago and I played it, and that'll do, that definitely. Here's a good one, Swinging on Lenox Avenue by Harry Hayes. I've not played that for a long time. Ah, here we are. This is what I'm looking for. This record always reminds me of Barry Bromlow because I seem to recall him calling it Shimishawab, as if it were in the French language, which I don't think it is. It's Shimishawobble, surely. But anyway, in deference to Barry, in the memory of Barry and his wonderful rhythm club, I'm going to announce this as McKinney's Cotton Pickers playing Shimmy Shawab on HMV B9228. There you are, HMV Collectors Series number 2. Yes, that was, strictly speaking, that could be described as a big band record. Yeah, it's a 12-piece. A 12-piece band. And I have to say, sound like Robin Cook. And I have to say to the Honourable Gentleman, Mile and Bird Joy is on the other side, and that was Shimmy Wobble. Basically, it's the Don Redman Orchestra of 1928, July the 11th, 1928. D. Redman, M. Senior, G. Thomas, presumably George Thomas, P. Robinson on reeds, L. Curl, that's C-U-R-L, B. Lee, that's presumably Baron Lee, trumpets, C. Davidson and C. Jones, trombones, probably Claude Jones, T. Rhodes, piano, that might be Todd Rhodes, but it might not. I don't know if Todd Rhodes goes back that far. D. Wilborn on banjo, and B. Escudero, tuba. Oh, and B. Escudero, tuba, and C. Austin, drums. There's a lineup on that one. What would we do without the 5th edition of Swing Music compiled by Edgar Jackson? I don't know. I do not know. Once upon a time I wouldn't have given you the time of day for that, but I rather like it now. Rather like it. This is an odd item. I don't know whether this comes under the heading of Corny Rhythm or not, but I'm going to use that as a catch-all title for all kinds of odds and sods. A few years ago, during World War II, somebody named Willie Lee Duckworth wrote a piece, or some kind of, I don't know whether you call it a song exactly, called the Duckworth Chant, and it was very, very popular, and I hope that Willie Lee Duckworth gets royalties every time this piece is sung, because if he did, he'd make an awful lot of money for himself, but I rather fear not, because the Duckworth Chant is more well known under another name, which will become immediately apparent when you hear it. This is Vaughan Monroe's version of the Duckworth Chant. In an article in praise of Tony Bennett called, I think it was called A Sound That Lets You In, or A Voice That Lets You In, or something like that. Whitney Balliet of the New Yorker was talking about popular singers, as big long list of singers, and he happened to mention Vaughan Monroe and said some very rude things about him. Said he was bathetic. I'm not quite sure what bathetic means, but I've an idea. It's not very complimentary. I quite like Vaughan Monroe's voice. He always used to have his own orchestra. I never could understand that, because most singers didn't have an orchestra, unless it was an orchestra in which they sang from time to time, like Tex Beneke. But Vaughan Monroe was primarily a singer, but he still had his own orchestra on all his records. Maybe that was the only way he could get a job. A friend of mine named Harry Ogden from that I met in the RAF, who used to live in Bolton, probably still does. I said something about, have you heard Vaughan Monroe singing there? I've said it again. Then he said, I don't like Vaughan Monroe, he's terrible. I said, it was rather nice. He says, no, he says, I'll tell you how bad Vaughan Monroe is. He says, we've got a singer in this country just as good. And this was Harry's, his logic is rather convoluted logic, that if we had a singer as good as Vaughan Monroe, then Vaughan Monroe couldn't have been any good. I don't know whether there's any justification for that. But the singer he was referring to, incidentally, was Reggie Goff. And I don't recall ever having heard Reggie Goff, or if I did hear him, I've forgotten it, but he sounded like. But I quite liked Vaughan Monroe on the ones that I liked him on there. I said it again. I liked him on his theme song, "Racing with the Moon." Although I haven't got a record. I don't think I've got a record of either of those. So much for Vaughan Monroe, whose name will never pass my lips again. When this song was written, and when this record was made, it took 9 days to get from New York to Rio de Janeiro, flying by air. Hard to believe, true nevertheless. This is called Flying Down to Rio, from the film Flying Down to Rio, and it's sung by Fred Astaire, and it was written by Vincent Youmans, Gus Kahn probably, and somebody Eliscu. I've forgotten his first name. I think it's Frederick, but I'm not sure.